I'm telling you, we can all learn how to become these people, these high-performing, high-achieving people.
Welcome back to 40 Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders, all in just 40 minutes. Today, we're joined by Adrienne Adhami, leading wellbeing coach, podcast host, and author. Listed as one of the top 25 Black entrepreneurs to watch by HSBC and UKBBS, Adrienne is a trailblazer, inspiring individuals and organizations to reach their full potential. In today's episode, we won't just explore Adrienne's incredible career, but we'll also discuss her latest book, Decisions That Matter, in more detail. With her own podcast, Power Hour, reaching over 5 million downloads to date, I've been super excited to get Adrienne on the show for quite a while. So it's an absolute honor to have her here with us today. So Adrienne, a big welcome. How are things?
Thank you so much, James. Yeah, everything's good. It's an exciting time. So yeah, really good.
It certainly sounds it. I can't wait to dive into the book and your career. It's going to be a great conversation. But before we do that, we're going to warm you up with a few quickfire questions. So can you please finish the following sentences after me? Number 1, the moment that defined my career was when?
I don't think it's happened yet.
Oh, okay. Okay, interesting. Well, given all that you've achieved, I'm excited.
So the moment is to come.
That's awesome. Okay. My biggest failure to date is?
Gosh, it's such a hard one, isn't it? Because it's how you define a failure. I'll give you 2, a personal and professional. I'd say my first book, Power Hour, now I would definitely deem it as a success, however you want to define that. It's been translated into different languages around the world. It's received lots of praise and lots of great feedback. So the first book I would define as a success now. However, just before the book was due to publish, obviously the publishers send it out to lots of different people and it landed on somebody's desk. Maybe they were in a bad mood. Maybe they didn't like me, but they wrote the most scathing review. The book hadn't even come out, about me and the book. It wasn't just the book. It was like a personal attack on me. And it was so embarrassing and painful. And I remember reading it and I just wanted the ground to swallow me. And I remember feeling like such a public failure. And the book hadn't even come out. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be the defining article. But it wasn't.
No, exactly.
So in that moment, it felt like a huge failure. And I felt embarrassed and I felt all the feels. But actually in the weeks and months and followed, it turned around.
Oh, gosh, it's amazing how. And look, sometimes these things have blessings in disguise, aren't they? I mean, that person, you never quite know what is going through someone's life, or they must have had a bad day, because it clearly was a massive success and something to be incredibly proud of. But you can get very derailed by things like that, can't you? And I've seen this in my world. You get someone on the wrong day and they can just totally change your mood and everything. But I'm glad that wasn't the case, as validated by many, many people.
Yeah, exactly. And I said I'd give you 2 because, again, it depends how you define failure and success. I'm sure we'll probably talk about this more later on. But after being married for 10 years, I made the very difficult decision to get a divorce. And I feel like divorce is something that people, of course, view as a failure because they call it a failed marriage. You know, the idea of a marriage is till death do us part, and anything short of that is seen as a failure. So at that time, that definitely felt like nobody gets married and thinks, oh, in 10 years' time, I'm going to be divorced. Especially he's the father of my son as well, so it was a very difficult decision. And I feel like, again, it's not about reframing it and saying, oh, it wasn't a failure, but I think it was the right decision. And moving forward, I think that actually the way I talk to people about whether it's divorce or even just relationships and separation in general, I think people often quite happy to hear my version, because I'll say to them, you know, it doesn't always mean, it's not this doom and gloom story that of this failure. Actually, it can be a triumph in a sense. It can be a positive choice, and it can be the right thing for you and for your family. So there's 2 for you, just to hit it off.
Yeah. No, and thanks for sharing that personal one, because I think that could really, I'm sure that will resonate with a lot of people. There's a lot of people I know that are so much happier for having got divorced or changed relationship, albeit it's awful to go through, of course. But actually, sometimes you have to make these difficult decisions. And by reframing it, you know, you can almost sort of move forward and have closure on that part of your life. And I think it's not talked about enough. And I really hate that phrase, failed marriage. I think that's just, there's so many wonderful things that come out of a marriage. it's not the right way to look at it. So thank you for that. A skill I wish I had mastered earlier is
storytelling. And the reason I say that is because now, as a public speaker, as a podcaster, as somebody who does a lot of brand advisory, so I work with some big brands and I help them to solve problems. I help them to look at future projections and ideas and kind of future trends. And storytelling is such a key skill. I think, whatever industry you're in, I think being able to explain ideas and take people on a journey and create a feeling and evoke an understanding of why this is happening and what's the context, what's the timeline, what happened before, where are we now, and what could potentially happen in the future. I think the ability to storytell is something that I think it's kind of always come naturally to me, but I've honed it and I've worked on it and I've seen how valuable that is now in the work that I do. So I think maybe that's a skill that if I'd had it sooner, I would have been able to utilize.
Yeah, it's a great one. And I think some of the best entrepreneurs and founders that we work with are just exceptional storytellers. They are and which is why they're able to raise a load of money, get huge numbers of customers, acquire the best talent, which is obviously what we do for day to day. But it really helps. It makes such a difference.
And it's something that people can learn and work on. And so with some of the founders that I've worked with in the past, I've helped them, for example, when they're, maybe they're going out pitching for their Series A or Series B, and the storytelling element, exactly as you said, some founders have got it, some people haven't. And it's also understanding it's a skill you can work on, but also if there's somebody better placed within your team to be the storyteller, then sometimes, people buy into an idea, they buy into a concept and a story. You can have all the data and the pitch decks and the growth and the projections, but if you can't tell the story, if it's not memorable, if it doesn't evoke a feeling, you won't raise the money. So sometimes it's better to have a really great storyteller, even if that person isn't necessarily the CEO.
Wise words. Thank you. And finally, a life lesson I keep coming back to is
consistency is overrated and life is inconsistent by its very nature.
Yeah.
Human beings, we're inconsistent. And actually, I'd say it's one of the things I've probably changed my tune on. So if I go back over the years, I'm sure I could find a clip of me somewhere on a stage or in a podcast saying consistency is key. And I used to say that with such conviction. And it's something that I think as I've gotten older, I have changed my mind on. And it's not to say that, of course, there are areas of life where consistency over time is important. But what consistency is, I think, has kind of changed for me. So this idea that consistency doesn't mean doing the same thing again and again, just repetition. For me, it's about you moving in the same direction, but accepting that life and human nature is inconsistent. There will be different seasons, different energy, different motivations, different distractions, different challenges, and you can keep going in the same direction. But I think the idea of consistency is just so counter to how we live as humans.
Yeah.
So that's something I keep coming back to, which is consistency is overrated.
I really do agree. And I love that because we all beat ourselves up so much when, you get into a good habit around exercise, professional development, personal development, whatever it might be. And then you get sick, your kids get sick, something throws you off, but I beat myself up about it. And I kind of, to the point of inaction, where I'm like, oh, there's just no point going, it's done now. I built such good habits and now I've got back to square one. I've got to start over again. You kind of get in on yourself and life just throws curveballs at you left, right and center. I think it's really true. It's not always about the same thing over and over and over again because it's not realistic. We could talk about that topic for much more, but we got to dive into all things you and your book. But before we get to that point, I'd love to learn a bit about the younger you. What was your upbringing like? Were there any big influences or pivotal moments in your childhood or earlier life that set you on this path that you're on? Yeah, we'd love to hear more.
Gosh, I know the title of this podcast, so I can't give you every single bit because it would be the whole episode. But yes, I would say there were definitely some pivotal moments, definitely some big, bold decisions. And essentially, I grew up north. I was raised by a single mum with 4 kids, low-income household. And so I grew up pretty quickly. I grew up, I suppose, with a sense of responsibility as an older sibling. So I took care of younger siblings. I learned how to do very practical things, whether that was cooking, loading, washing, getting the bus to school, doing my homework. I figured out, I think at a very young age, and I don't think I really recognized, of course, until I was older, that's not necessarily the norm for everyone. But I figured out how to plan my time, how to get myself to places on time. I'd get, I think, 2 buses after school to go to dance class, to go to athletics track, to then get home and maybe make myself a jacket potato. I was quite self-sufficient and quite independent at a young age. And I think seeing my mum, who, like I said, low income household, she had a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. And I think she often felt quite restricted and quite trapped. I think it definitely instilled, I guess, a ambition and a fire in my belly. I always felt like I wanted to strive to achieve. And I always thought, Adrienne, if you want to do something, you're going to roll up your sleeves and you're going to do it. And so at 16, I left home. I moved to London by myself at 16, no backup plan. No, I didn't know a single person in London. And I basically was, I've had big ambition from a young age, because I just never really wanted to feel that feeling that I think I saw in her, which was she didn't have agency. She didn't have choices. She didn't feel as though she could change her situation. And that's probably instilled a lot of things in me, from the work that I do to the way I live my life to the things that I value and the things that I prioritize. But it's a short version for you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It was such a brave call at that age. But like, you can tell also from there being incredibly self-sufficient. We often see that trait in entrepreneurial people who go on to do great things because they've just got that innate drive. They've had to grow up fast. They're used to being independent and sort of carving your own path. So I'd imagine that was very daunting, but has clearly worked out given your incredibly successful career. You've, published 2 books. You have a super successful podcast. You mentioned some of the work you do with these incredible brands and deliver keynotes all around the world. So much to be proud of. This is a compounding thing over many years of hard work and graft. Clearly risks have been taken along the way. So do you mind sharing just some of those big milestones, those big moments in that career journey? Because it's very easy to look at the highlight reel, but I love to dive into just some of those really big moments for you.
Gosh, so the first, I guess, real job / career that I had, which might be surprising to people, was actually performing in the West End. So, as a dancer, I was a singer, and I performed in the West End when I was 21 years old. I was in a musical called We Will Rock You, which is the Queen musical on Tottenham Court Road at the Dominion Theatre. And I just remember feeling like, so many people, if they've trained in musical theatre, in dance, that is almost like the pinnacle. In London, it's renowned around the world. Everybody knows the West End. So I was in that show, and then my husband at the time, unfortunately, became very ill very suddenly. So it was definitely a life-changing moment. It was just one of those things where everything pretty much changed in my life. I walked out of the theatre and said, "See you tomorrow," to the cast and crew. And then I never went back because he was so unwell that I essentially had to essentially be kind of a carer. And also my son was on the way. So it was a very, very challenging year. But what happened after that, essentially from a career perspective, is that I essentially thought, okay, Adrienne, I was kind of being told by other people as well, like, you are very good at motivating people. You love physical activity. I mentioned I'd done athletics, I'd done dance. I was very athletic and sporty. And, I think it was my sister at the time that said, you should do something with that kind of passion for fitness and health. And because my ex-husband had been ill, I was really focused on understanding, well, what happened? Because he was just a healthy, fit guy. So for him to just suddenly, he had a spontaneous brain hemorrhage, for him to suddenly just drop down, like, I was like, why would this happen? Like, at the time, this was 14 years ago. Now the wellness industry is very different. But back then, there was no connection between stress management, sleep, nutrition, diet, relationships. Everything was just kind of separate. And so it was like, okay, if you had a head injury or a brain hemorrhage, it was just did you bang your head? But there was no understanding of brain health and sleep and stress and all of these things. So I think, both things were happening at the same time. One was I was really getting interested in the body, specifically the brain. Why did this happen? But also thinking from a career perspective, what are my talents? What are my skills? And what could I do? So I restudied, I started learning as much as I could. I'm a voracious learner. So I started learning more about physical training, personal training, group X training, nutrition, you name it. And so over the next few years, I essentially built a career in the fitness industry. And that was everything from personal training to coaching, running to working with athletes. I ended up signing with Adidas as a global ambassador for 3 years, which was incredible because that just opened so many opportunities to me. I was traveling the world with them. I was interviewing athletes, working with designers on tech apparel. It was just a whole incredible, I suppose, step in my career journey. I then started working at a fitness app, a startup called Fit. Now, some people might know the app, it's FIIT. And during the pandemic, you can imagine, at home fitness was booming. But I'd been there for a couple of years, so I was the 12th or 13th employee. Now, for anyone who's worked at a startup, they'll know that a growth startup especially, it's a very exciting place to work. And as a learner, you can learn so much. So I was in every meeting. I was learning from for the product and the devs team. I was learning about the application features, how are we onboarding people? What's the metrics? How many classes? I was looking really at kind of the data. I was working with the marketing team on the messaging. I was listening to the finance updates. I felt like I'd gone to a university for business, but I was being paid to be there and to share my expertise around fitness and around not just fitness in terms of the physical training, but my thing, I suppose, was always looking at behavior. So habits. Why do some people hit the gym 5 times a week? Other people, they buy the membership and they don't go. So I was always interested to look at this data, looking at wearables, really kind of combining the tech with motivation and behavior. So I was there for 4 years. And throughout that time, you can imagine 4 years at a startup, so many things changed. The pandemic happened. So of course, that meant the app was booming and there was a lot of opportunities. Alongside that, you've already told the listeners that I was hosting my podcast, interviewing athletes, interviewing founders, interviewing authors. I wrote my first book. I got kind of asked to start delivering webinars during the pandemic for some of the biggest tech brands. So Microsoft, Apple, again, speaking about behavior change, motivation. And essentially the thread between everything has been, how can I help people to perform at their best, to look at the science of goal setting, look at the science of motivation, look at behavior, look at decision making, because we all need it. Whatever industry you're in, fitness, business, entrepreneurship, we all need these skills. And some people, they look at others and think they naturally have it. I'm telling you, we can all learn how to become these people, these high performing, high achieving people.
Love that. It's so inspiring. And I love the fact that you mentioned about just like the opportunity in early stage startups to learn and get exposure is unparalleled. And this is why I'm such a big advocate for younger people hearing and knowing about this as a career path, because I wish I'd have known it earlier. If I'm honest, when I started, I just went on a grad scheme and did 2.5 years. And I've seen just so many people benefit from getting that sort of exposure.
Yeah. And if I can add a few things that I think might be useful, the idea that, like I said, I was at the startup. So how did I start there? My first, I guess, role was director of fitness. And I was like, okay, I could have just stayed in that box. I could have stayed in that lane and just stayed in fitness. But as I said, I'm a voracious learner and I was learning from all these other areas, but also having an input. Often people will, maybe for example, the founders, they'd come from a tech world, they'd come from Google, 2 of them. They didn't necessarily know the consumer in the way that I did. I understood exactly who their target consumer was, and I knew what they cared about, how they shop, how they purchase. I knew that consumer. So you can add a lot of value if you just trust that your knowledge and your kind of contribution is actually really valuable. So that's the first thing. Second thing was, over the years, I changed my role. So I didn't just stay director of fitness. So once I was working a lot more with the brand team, I was like, actually, this title doesn't fit. So I was very strategic about saying to the founders, okay, I want to change my job title, because I knew that later on that's going to help me. So I changed to, I think I was a brand strategist. And then in my final year, I actually so I got a promotion. I was part of the C-suite team, and I changed titles again to director of innovation. And the reason I specifically chose that, this is quite a long story, but I'll keep it short, is that I got approached by a competitor, and it's a big competitor. So everybody would know who this brand is. At the time, they were about to launch a competitor to Fit, and they came along. They could offer me more money. They could offer me, obviously, the big kind of, we're this exciting brand, and everybody knows this big global brand. But something at the time wasn't right for me to take this job. So I went to the founders of the app and said, listen, I've been offered this other job. They didn't know if I was going to leave or not. And what I said to them was, in order for me to stay, I know you can't match the salary that this big brand can offer me, but I'd like more shares and I'd also like this title. So I wanted to be director of innovation because I knew that obviously now I'm no longer working there. In the years that followed, when I was delivering talks, when I was at London Tech Week, when I was doing all these different things, and being the director of innovation, I think helped to open some of those doors rather than being director of fitness. So you can always think as well about, regardless of whether you're a startup or in a bigger company, sometimes when people try to, what's the leverage? They always just think about money. Like, can I earn more money at this job? Actually, there's so many different opportunities outside of just how much you can get paid. Things like title and things like shares when you work in a startup.
Yeah, startups are very fast moving and evolving all the time. And if you are hardworking, if you are curious, then it's also there's opportunities to pivot into new functional areas, learn more. You can make yourself invaluable in a startup, and that can open many, many doors internally but also externally. And it's much easier to move, say, cross to a different function and learn new skills and experience within a company rather than doing it externally. So yeah, I love your advice, and I hope this will inspire people listening to this that maybe have always been tempted or thought about the startup route but maybe never explored it, to at least have a look and experience it for yourself, because yeah, it's such a brilliant environment for curious types, for sure. We need to come on and talk about your book, Decisions That Matter. This is your latest book that by the time this episode goes out will be out there in the world for our listeners to go out and get a copy of. So do you mind telling our audience a bit about what inspired this book, your second book, and what they can expect once they've opened it up and given it a read?
Absolutely. So back in the pandemic, I mentioned I was asked by some companies to come and do presentations and do workshops for their employees. Now, I'm sure, even though it's been 5 years, I'm sure we can all remember what it was like in the pandemic, waking up and knowing that you were going 7 steps to your desk, open your laptop, and then that was it. And for so many people, it was such a strange time for lots of reasons, of course. I mean, homeschooling, anyone who homeschooled like I did, oh my gosh, that was traumatic. But yes, we were all doing the juggle. And when I was delivering these workshops and these talks, a lot of people were kind of reconsidering a lot of things in their lives. Like, is this the right job for me? Do I want to work for this company? Do I want to live in this city anymore? Do I want to be married to this person? It was really kind of a big time of change. So what I found doing my workshops, I was talking about goal setting, I was talking about habits, and I was talking about decision making. And I shared a matrix, which is the decision making matrix that's now in the end of the book. And so many people got in touch with me after the workshops to say, hey, can you send me that matrix? Like, where did you get that? Can you, just send me and basically it started this conversation. I noticed quite quickly that regardless of the employee, whether they were very senior, junior, older, younger, it was a universal thing that we're all making decisions every single day. And it's a challenging thing. And especially now in the modern world. And it kind of just, it planted the seed. So 2 years ago, I sat down with this idea and thought, okay, there's definitely more to be explored here. I looked around. I couldn't find a book about decision making that's really relevant to the modern world.
Amazing. I'm going to get this book because I really feel like I need this, and I know a lot of our listeners will as well. So did you have a particular person in mind when you were writing it? Is there a perfect reader? I'd love just to make sure that all the right people, hopefully all of our audience, go out and get it. But who were you thinking when you were putting pen to paper?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there is. I think the person I was writing this book for is probably quite entrepreneurial, probably very ambitious. They're probably quite an A-type person. So they've probably got strategies and frameworks. They've probably got goals and habits for themselves, and they work really hard and they're ambitious and they know they can do a lot of things. So therefore, they're probably managing professional goals. They might be training for a half marathon or an Ironman or something like that. They might have a family. And I think ambitious people are voracious learners. So essentially what I've done is, I spent 2 years researching, reading, studying, pulling all these different things together, these frameworks, these tools, these stories, these anecdotes, so that people can essentially, hopefully when they read the book, apply these things to their lives. Because I appreciate, as I said, ambitious people, they've got a lot going on. And it's kind of the idea that we can simplify, we can eliminate some of the overwhelm of decision making. We can be intentional so that we're not just kind of saying yes too often, too quickly. We're not going through the motions. We're not doing things that potentially are good for others, but not good for us. So there's lots in there. But yeah, if I had to define it for that, who's the reader, I'd say it's probably an ambitious person like you and I.
This episode is sponsored by Capsule, the certified B Corp redefining insurance for high growth scaling businesses. As a neo broker powered by cutting edge API technology, Capsule streamline the insurance process, removing manual hassle and delivering tailored solutions that evolve with your business. They support ambitious companies across fast paced, innovative sectors such as fintech, health tech, SaaS, and sustainability, including clients like Bloom and Wild, Moneybox, Castor, and What Three Words. If you're a venture-backed startup looking to outsource the buying and management of your insurance, find out more on www.capsulecover.com. Now, back to today's 40-Minute Mentor. There's so many things that I think I can do really well, but I feel like I do need some tools. I need some things to kind of, make better decisions. And I often find that, I get that analysis paralysis a lot. And that seems to be something that we talk about quite a lot. We hear quite a lot. So, and we're so sport for choice now. It's like, which direction to go? So why do you think this happens? And is there any advice you have for our audience that might be a bit like me, that kind of want to do so many things and then sometimes get stuck, just go, oh, I don't actually know which path to go down?
Yes, absolutely. It's such a common challenge. And a lot of your listeners will be relating to that. And a lot of them might have their big idea or their small idea, but they haven't taken action. So if that's you and you're kind of stuck and you're procrastinating and you tell people, this is what I want to do, this is what I could do, but you haven't started yet, then hopefully this book would definitely help. So the reason the analysis paralysis happens, especially now with modern living, is, you touched on this already, we have an abundance of choice, more choice than we need, more choice than we want. And although it might sound like a good thing to think, wow, we've got loads of options, actually, and the data supports this, the more options we have, the less satisfied we feel with our final choice. So that is across all domains of life. That could be looking at business, it could be looking at job roles, it could be looking at who to date, it could be looking at houses or flats to rent. It just goes on and on. Holidays to book. Where do you want to go? If you can go anywhere in the entire world, how are you going to be satisfied with your choice? Because you could have gone somewhere else. So for a lot of us, it's that looking left, looking right, looking at other people, comparison, and often as well, there's a lot of shoulds. So I should do this, I should do that. So how I try to help, I suppose, with this analysis paralysis, there's lots of different ways that I break down and talk through in the book. But I think the most important really is understanding intentional decision making. So as I mentioned, you're not just saying yes or just saying no as an automatic response because you're overwhelmed and maybe stressed out. So creating the time and space to make intentional decisions. Also, I'd say understanding your value hierarchy, so that when you make a decision, it's actually based in your values, not what your parents want, not what your partner thinks, your own values. And then lastly, because, oh gosh, there's so many things here, analysis paralysis comes up in so many ways. But lastly, I think it's accepting which season of your life are you in right now? Because sometimes the decision that we make or the decision we want to make, it's not the right time. And I think if you understand, okay, let's say a real good example is like, let's say you're in the season of working at that startup or you've started your own business and your season of kind of work is the focus, it has to be. So imagine like a spotlight shining on a stage. The spotlight is on the work in the business. It can't be on relationships. It can't be on training for the Ironman. It's on that one thing. But the spotlight might shift. So let's say you become a new parent and you've got a new child in the house. That's not the season for you to be getting up at 5 and doing your morning cold swim, plunge, sauna. It's not the season. So I think when people can understand, okay, which season am I in? Is this the season for this decision? What's the hierarchy of my values? Is this the most important thing in this season? Then you can move forward. You can take action. I think sometimes it's just there's so many variables and we don't even stop to think, is this what I really want? And is this the right time?
Yeah, such good advice and very relatable. I think somebody once talked to me about having a hob on a cooker with four rings, and often you can't have everything going full belt, otherwise things will bubble over and explode. You need, sometimes things are simmering and sometimes things are going up, and that's often how I've tried to think about family, friends, exercise, work, and sometimes it just, you have to give more to one or the other. It doesn't mean you disregard all of them, the important things in your life, but sometimes it's not feasible to go 100% at everything. So I really love that. In your book, you explain the 6 fundamental rules of decision making. So I wasn't sure if that was linked to what you just said before, or if you could share a bit more about that and any further sort of actionable advice with listeners that are kind of probably listening to this going, okay, this makes so much sense. This is going to be very helpful. Is there anything else you'd encourage them to think about?
Sure. So, yes, I talk about 6 fundamental rules right at the start. And this is kind of the idea that sometimes rules can sound quite limiting, but actually, rules tend to liberate us. You know, we can't play any game if you don't understand the rules. So, these 6 fundamental rules are there exactly for that, to kind of guide us and for us to come back to when we feel stuck. So, I won't necessarily go through all of them in detail, but maybe for this conversation, maybe I'll just highlight 2 or 3. So the first rule is to determine the stakes. And so often a mistake people make is that we take all decisions as if they are the same when they're not. You know, some decisions are very high stakes. And that what defines something as being high stakes is that it's potentially irreversible. It's potentially going to have long-term impact. It might impact others as well as yourself. High stakes decisions, the good thing about them is that typically they're quite infrequent. We don't make those kind of decisions every day. Whereas if you think about a low stakes decision, so something that's probably, you know, it's not a big deal. We make this decision every day. It has a small impact. It's not the end of the world if we make a bad choice, and it's probably reversible. We can undo the decision. They're completely different. So high stakes, low stakes, and even no stakes decisions, we need to figure out and kind of bucket things and go, okay, this is high stakes. I need to give this the right amount of time. This is low stakes. Why am I wasting so much time scrolling through these options or looking through my wardrobe or pondering what am I going to eat for breakfast? Like some of these kind of mundane decisions that we make again and again and again, if we can think about frameworks and tools to eliminate and simplify those, we will save ourselves so much energy, so much brain space that we can use for more important things in our day. So, high stakes, low stakes, no stakes. I feel like once you've read that part of the book, you can just, oh my gosh, you feel free. You're like, okay, this is outsourced, liberating. And then the high stakes decisions, you can give them the energy they deserve. Another one is trust your gut. Now, how could I write a book about decisions and not about decision making and not talk about intuition or talk about the gut feeling? Now, it's more complex than people think. Sometimes I think people think, oh, it's just a woo woo thing. Oh, trust your gut. Like, listen to your, and people go, well, how do I do that? Is that emotion led decisions? Is that just how I feel in the moment? So I really tried to explain what intuition is, both the science and the art of intuition, what red flags are. And essentially, red flags are your brain recognizing signals that you've seen before. So it's pattern recognition. So doctors do this every day when they make a quick diagnosis, when they see a baby with symptoms that they've seen 1,000 times. They're not magicians, they're not gurus. It's pattern recognition. We have it ourselves. You might think of an example yourself where you've had an interaction with someone, or something has told you, a flag goes up inside that goes, be cautious, or this doesn't feel right. And when your body signals that to you, that's your intuition. That is your previous experience, your subconscious, unconscious mind remembering previous experience or traits or things that have happened, and you've seen it play out and you know what typically comes next. So I talk about this because it's really important for us to understand what is intuition, how do we trust our gut, and then how do we marry the two between some decisions require analysis, some require intuition, and most of the time, the most effective decision is a combination of the two.
That's really interesting. I guess a big byproduct of decision fatigue is procrastination. What are your top tips when it comes to overcoming this? Because it's something that we all struggle with sometimes, and probably some more than others. But I guess you more than anyone will know how to train that decision making muscle and overcome that sort of typical when you get into that mode of procrastinating too much. So, yeah, what would you say to that?
So I mentioned before about, is it the right season? Is it the right time? So if you've figured that out and you're like, yes, it is the right season, it is the right time. This is the time for me to focus on this business idea, or this is the time for me to focus on the house renovation, whatever it is. Then you need to call time on certain decisions. You cannot allow things to just go on, weeks and months. And this can also happen in a group setting. So, again, going back to working in startups or working in teams, there can be certain things on the agenda that kind of roll on every week, every month. They don't necessarily get resolved. There's no person responsible for concluding. So it just goes on and on and on. You can kind of go back and forth, no decision gets made. So, in that example, that's the kind of form of procrastination because no one's really want to put a stake in the ground and say, this is the direction and commit. So I think it's useful to call time. And what I mean by that is simply agree on a time, whether it's 6 weeks, open up your calendar, circle it in your calendar and say, we are going to make a decision by that time. And then find out the information that you need in that time. Do your analysis, ask someone for advice, write your pros and cons, use the decision-making matrix in the book. And at the end, when it comes to that date, you just have to move forward with the information that you have. You have to accept that you will never have all the answers. You'll never know. 100% certainty is a myth. Security, certainty, all of those things, control, it's a myth. But with the information you have, make the best decision that you can and move on. And I think the most important reason I stress this is because the data and the stats show that when it comes to end of life, when it comes to regrets and it comes to mistakes, the biggest regrets are not regrets about mistakes. They are regrets of inaction. So what that means is if you start something and it fails, you don't necessarily regret it. But if you never start, if you never try, that's the regret that haunts you, that you look back and go, if only I did this, if only I tried that, if only. So don't let regrets of inaction be there for you in 5, 10, 20, 50 years. Call time on the decision, whatever information you have available, and then move forwards.
So powerful and so true. Thank you for sharing, Adrienne. For you personally, what has been the biggest decision that you've struggled to make? Because I think it's something that we all struggle with, right? So even though you're a real expert at this, is there one particular thing that you struggle with? And are there still decisions coming down the line that you're like dreading having to make?
That's such a good question. I think in my work life, I want to say yes to everything. So that's my innate feeling, not just because I used to probably be a people pleaser, but now it's more that there's exciting opportunities and I want to say yes. I love my work. I love what I do. But from an energy perspective, and in order to kind of create the lifestyle that I want to have as a parent and as a partner, I cannot work 90-hour weeks. I can't do that. You know, I have a son, I have 2 stepchildren, I have a wonderful husband, and I want to spend time with those people, you know? So I think on a daily or weekly basis, I think being very intentional about my yeses and about not overcommitting, those are decisions that, again, they can seem quite small in the moment, but they stack up. So that small decisions, for example, to be overcommitted in my diary, to be too busy, maybe I can't, if I was overcommitted, let's say I can't pick my son up from school every day, or I can't go and watch his football matches, or maybe I need to travel more, so I need to stay overnight in the hotel. And if it's once, if it's twice, okay, no big deal. But if that creeps in every week, every month, before you know it, your child is 17 and you're that parent who wasn't really there. And that can seem so harsh in the world that we live in now because we're all encouraged to just, work and hustle and get after it. But for me, I think about the trade-offs. I think about the long-term impact of a small decision. And the long-term impact for me is maybe I'll sell less books, maybe I'll make less money, maybe I'll have less podcast downloads. But I know that I've been on the sideline at the football. I know that I understand, I know what's going on in with homework. And yeah, that's an important decision that I make every day, I suppose.
Yeah. And that's so important. I can really relate to that. And it's very easy for those small compromises that you make. Oh, okay, I'll just do that. I'll just do, before you know it, it just creeps in, doesn't it? And I found lockdown was really important for me because I used to do 5 days a week commuting to London. I live out in sort of an hour and a half away, which was crazy in hindsight, but it meant that for the first 3-4 years of my daughter's life, and I'm love being a dad, it really was the best thing that ever happened to me. But I really wasn't there a lot in the first 3-4 years of her life, because I only really saw her at weekends for like quality time. And that shift that I realized from the pandemic, as hardcore and horrible as it was in many ways, that I could work at home and I was able to actually cover loads more ground. And thereafter, I now only go to town twice a week, and I never miss bedtimes, and I'm always there for like pickups and stuff on the days that I'm at home. And it's made such a big difference. I am much more present and have much stronger relationship as a result. So these things are really important. And I would take less money, I wouldn't want to ever compromise on that.
Yeah, and it's a great point that we've shared, but I think as well, just echoing that it's not easy. It's really not easy. So, I take August off, and so I've got blended family, I was saying. So sometimes, there's 3 kids here and sometimes there's no kids here. So maybe that helps with that balance a little bit, but I take August off to spend time with them. And so last year, of course, something comes up. It's a great opportunity. It's a great work thing. And I was like, it's in August. I knew we were going to be in Italy. And I said, listen, I can't do it. I was gutted. I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a great opportunity. And I said, I can't do it. And then I remember being away in Italy. Obviously, I forgot all about it. I'm not thinking about it at all. This is where social media is so dangerous. I flicked through and I saw, obviously they've got someone else to do it. I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh. And you just have that feeling like people want to pretend to be like, well, I don't care. I did care. And I was like, oh man. And then I had to check myself and go, Adrienne, you've chosen this. You know what I mean? Again, intentional decision making. This was your choice. It's not always going to feel like I often say to people, the best decisions aren't always the decisions that feel good. They don't always feel good in the moment. You can feel sad about something and it still be the right choice. So that was one where I was like, damn, why can't I be in 2 places at once?
It's true. It is hard, but sometimes you just got to set those boundaries and try not to think about it. It's so difficult, though. It is so difficult. You've got a whole chapter in your new book dedicated to redefining success and how success changes depending on the season of life that you mentioned, which I really love that. And so I'd love to know how your own version or definition of success, what does that look like to you personally? And how has that evolved over the years as your career has kind of changed and your life has changed?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, yes, I talk about seasons of change, challenge, and growth, and how if you understand which season you're in and you redefine success for yourself, success, I think, is something that will consistently change throughout your life. I don't think what I think of success for myself when I'm 50 is going to be the same as when I was 20. So I guess some real examples of how it's changed is that I mentioned, growing up with a single mother and, she didn't have a lot of money. And I always remember feeling like I want to earn money and I want to own a house and I want to have savings. And I remember listening to books and I listen to audiobooks a lot. So that's why my book is always available on audio, because I listened to so many audiobooks and I was listening to audiobooks about finance and about investing and about pensions. Like, who does that when they're young? But I was like, this is important because I really wanted, like I said, that agency and freedom. So for a while, success for me was about economic security for myself, for my family. It was about earning more money to pay my mortgage. I just wanted to own my home, like pay off my mortgage. And I always just thought, for me at that time in that season, that was really important. And I say that really honestly because I often think as well, whether it's just a female thing, I don't know if I don't want to make it too gendered, but I sometimes think women aren't encouraged to talk about money and say, I want to earn a lot of money. So I wanted to do that. I think now success is, I guess, back to the point we just talked about with time. Success in this season of my life is about being able to have agency of my time. So I say yes to things. I can be at different places. I can go for a tennis lesson or go for a run in the afternoon on a sunny day because I've made my schedule in a way that suits me. I'm not chained to, someone else's time. So it changes. And like I said, in 10 years' time, maybe success will be defined for me in a different way. But I think it's important for people to define it for themselves and not worry about, does it sound virtuous? Does it sound if it's true to you, you will be motivated to achieve your goals. But if it's not, and you just got like, this is my definition of success, and doesn't it sound great, but you don't mean it, forget it. Like I said, don't let someone judge you. If my old, I want to earn money so I can own my own home. Somebody might go, that's materialistic. No, for me, it was about security, agency, and freedom.
Love that. Thank you, Adrienne. We're almost at a close, but I wanted to touch upon your brilliant podcast, Power Hour, before we get to our 2 wrap-up questions. You've had some incredible guests, James Clear, Mel Robbins, former 40-Minute Mentor Grace Beverley. It's a really awesome show, and it's based around the concept of taking sort of 1 hour each day for personal development. So I guess I would love to know, why is this so important to achieve high performance? And particularly for the founders that are listening to this and the busy kind of startup types that we know are a big part of our audience, who are sometimes quite notoriously not that great at doing this because they're so busy. You know, they one of the idea of taking an hour out of their day is probably like terrifying. So what can they do, and why should they invest the time in doing so?
Oh, right. So yes, the power hour. It is exactly as you said. It's 1 hour every day. And that, I guess, we talked about consistency. What you do in that hour could change, but the habit and the idea of having 1 hour, I mean, it's been a game changer for me and for lots of listeners of my podcast. So the reason I think it's so important, especially for those A-type busy people, is because the way we work and live now isn't the most effective for our productivity, for our emotional well-being, for new ideas. You know, everyone talks about innovation. You know, I go to a lot of tech events and I speak about innovation myself. What does innovation mean? It means doing something in a new way that has never been done before. We cannot create new businesses, new ideas, new technologies, new things if we are just overwhelmed and busy from the minute we open our eyes to the minute we close them. If we're constantly replying to other people's demands, emails, WhatsApp, Slack, you will never have an original thought. You'll never create something new. And I love this idea that I've been thinking about a lot and talking about recently, that ordinary people, all of us, ordinary people, can do extraordinary things, but also everything you see in the world, every extraordinary thing you see, it started with a person, it started with an idea, whether that's a world record, whether that's a medicine, whether that's a technology, a bridge, an aeroplane. It all started with an idea. And I just think the reason we need space and solitude, even if it's just for 1 hour a day, is to have space and solitude, to have new ideas. So that's when I get some of my best ideas. And you can do whatever you want in that hour. You can meditate, you can walk, you can read, you can listen to music, you can stretch, you can lift weights, whatever you want. Do something every day. Mine's in the morning. Create an hour and just see. Oh, you see that you all know about compound effect. So see the compound of that 1 hour over a year of your life.
Yeah, I love it so much. And it really resonates with something my mum used to tell me. I was a notorious crammer for exams. And she would always say, you stop before the exam, give yourself an hour, give your mind like for the freedom for inspiration to hit you. And it always just stuck with me that I would always just stop cramming. I'd just take an hour before, try and clear my head, and then go into the exam. It's sort of like a space for those ideas to come. And I've always sort of stuck by that. So yeah, thank you for sharing. We're sadly at an end, Adrienne. We've got 2 final questions. This is 40-minute mentor. So I have to ask, if you could be mentored by anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I'd love to be mentored by Adam Grant.
Oh, nice. That's a good one.
Who wouldn't?
Okay, that's a great one. And finally, what is the last piece of career advice or even life advice that you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
The last piece of advice that I would like to leave you with is that only you know, really, what is possible for yourself, for your life, your current situation, your current circumstances. They are current. They do not define you and they do not determine your future. So I've talked a lot, of course, about decision making because of the book. Be intentional about the decisions that you make and don't let anyone else, anything else, your past, your parents, your school teachers, anything like that, hold you back if you know what's possible for yourself and for your life.
That is a wonderful and inspiring place to end this conversation, Adrienne. It's been a real joy. Thank you. I'm a big admirer of yours and I can't wait to go out and get the book. I really hope our listeners will go and do the same because, what you talk about, and it's so important. And I think it's going to have a real impact in a lot of people's lives. So, I can't wait to get hold of a copy and wish you all the very best with it.
Thank you so much. And I know I mentioned this already, but if you're like me and you like listening to audio and podcasts, then the book is on Spotify and it's on Audible. So yes, please do buy a copy, but also download it and have a listen.
Yeah, I will do because I love getting out in nature and listening to books. So I'm going to download it as soon as it comes out and I'll let you know.
Awesome.
Cheers, Adrienne. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really hope that you found it useful and inspiring. If we have left any questions unanswered, or if you have any feedback or guest recommendations for future series, then please make sure you get in touch on info@jbmc.co.uk. I often get asked by listeners how you can help us spread the word about 40 Minute Mentor. There are two simple ways you can help. Firstly, share this episode on your preferred social media platform, and LinkedIn is probably where I'm most likely to see it. And you can also leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every share on social media and review left on the podcast platforms really helps us to get 40 Minute Mentor in front of new audiences and share the power of mentorship even further. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, and I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday for even more pocket sized mentorship.